The human delegation was tiny, just Kim and 3 assistants. They looked like children next to the Valari guards who escorted them, each alien standing nearly 7 feet tall with sleek metallic-looking skin that shimmered under the strange lights. The grand hall opened before them, revealing hundreds of Valari nobles arranged in a perfect semicircle. At the center, on a floating throne of what appeared to be liquid metal, sat Grand Monarch Taiho. His forearms were adorned with ceremonial armor, and the crown on his head contained stones that changed color with his breathing. "The human ambassador approaches," announced the royal herald, voice booming through the chamber. Kim walked forward, remembering the weeks of practice for this exact moment. 15 steps forward, slight bow from the waist, right hand extended, palm up to show peaceful intentions. The weight of humanity's future rested on her shoulders. This first official contact would set the tone for all relations to come. As she reached the 10th step, something felt wrong. Her suit made a quiet hissing noise, and suddenly the air inside began to feel thin. A warning light flashed on her wrist display, oxygen levels dropping rapidly. "Malfunction," she gasped, trying to maintain composure while reaching for the emergency backup switch at her belt. Her fingers felt numb. The room began to spin. Kim stumbled, fighting to stay upright as whispers rippled through the alien crowd. The backup system wasn't responding. Something was terribly wrong. 3 more steps forward and her legs gave out completely. Kim collapsed to her knees before the alien monarch, gasping for breath as black spots danced in her vision. The grand hall fell silent until a low rumble began. It grew louder, and Kim realized with horror that Grand Monarch Taiho was laughing. The sound was like stones grinding together, harsh and unpleasant to human ears. "Is this truly the best Earth has to offer?" Taiho's voice boomed across the hall as Kim struggled to remain conscious. "This fragile creature that cannot even stand. In our presence?" The royal court joined in the laughter, the sound crashing against Kim like physical blows. Through dimming vision, she saw one of the royal guards smirking, subtly tucking away a small device into his ceremonial armor. "Look how it struggles to breathe," Taiho continued, rising from his throne and towering over her. "Humans, soft-skinned, weaklings who require machines just to survive outside their tiny world. And they believed themselves worthy of diplomatic relations with the mighty Valari Empire?" Kim's backup systems finally engaged, pumping emergency oxygen into her suit. As her vision cleared slightly, she remained on the ground, appearing defeated, while her neural implants, invisible to Valari scanners, recorded everything. The guard's sabotage, the monarch's mockery, the court's cruel amusement. "Perhaps," Taiho announced to the laughing crowd, "we should keep this specimen as a royal curiosity, a reminder of what happens to lesser species who reach beyond their capabilities." One of Kim's assistants rushed forward despite protocol, helping her to her feet. Kim allowed herself to appear weak, slumping against her helper, while secretly activating the secondary recording functions of her implants to capture detailed scans of the palace interior, the defensive systems, and the layout of the royal guards. "Grand Monarch," she managed weakly. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, human," Taiho replied, settling back onto his throne with obvious satisfaction. "You have shown us exactly what your species is worth. The Valari Empire has no use for diplomatic relations with creatures who cannot even stand on their own 2 feet. He waved a dismissive hand. "You may return to your ship. When next we communicate, it will be to inform your people of the territories we claim as our own. Be grateful we find you too insignificant to conquer outright." As the guards escorted the human delegation out, Kim caught sight of representatives from other species watching from shadowed alcoves. 3 different alien races, all bearing marks of subjugation. Their eyes met Kim's briefly, and she saw something unexpected there. Not mockery, but hope. Back on the shuttle, Kim finally removed her damaged suit and took a deep breath of filtered air. "Ambassador, are you all right?" her assistant asked worriedly. "The suit sabotage could have killed you." Kim's expression hardened as she plugged her neural implants into the ship's computer, downloading everything she'd recorded. "They think we're weak," she said quietly, watching the data transfer. "They've made their first mistake." On the screen, The image of the saboteur appeared alongside schematics of the palace defenses and biological data on the Valari physiology, all captured during her supposed moment of weakness. "Send word to Earth," Kim ordered, eyes never leaving the screen. "The Valari aren't interested in peace, and tell them I'll need the special modifications ready when I return." The medical bay of the Earthship Horizon hummed with quiet efficiency as Ambassador Kim sat up on the examination table, waving away the doctor's concerns. "I'm fine, really," she insisted, though the bruises on her arms told a different story. The oxygen deprivation from her sabotage suit had left its marks. "You should rest another day at least," Dr. Lee argued, scanning her vitals one more time. Kim shook her head. "We don't have time. Every minute we waste gives the Valari more advantage." Once alone, Kim pulled up the holographic display showing everything her neural implants had captured during the disastrous first contact. The Valari thought her collapse was weakness, never suspecting that even in that vulnerable moment, she was gathering intelligence. Before becoming an ambassador, Kim had spent 15 years in special forces, specializing in adaptive reconnaissance. Those skills were why Earth had chosen her for this mission, not just for her diplomatic training, but for what she could do when diplomacy failed. "Computer, analyze structural weaknesses in the Valari Palace design," she commanded. The hologram shifted, highlighting stress points in the crystal architecture. Another command brought up the biological data her implants had gathered on Valari physiology. Their impressive strength, but poor peripheral vision. Their sensitive hearing, but vulnerability to certain frequencies. A soft chime interrupted her. "Work." "Ambassador," said her communications officer through the intercom, "we're receiving transmissions from the planet's surface. Not from the Valari, from someone else." Kim hurried to the bridge, where her team had isolated 3 distinct signal patterns, each originating from different regions of the planet. "They're using old Earth radio frequencies," explained the communications officer. "Frequencies the Valari don't monitor, because they consider them primitive." When they decoded the messages, Kim wasn't surprised to find they came from representatives of the 3 species she'd glimpsed in the shadows of the royal court: the Nari, the Peloth, and the Vox. Once proud civilizations, now reduced to servants, and laborers under Valari rule. "They want to meet," Kim told her team. "They've been monitoring our ship, and they knew exactly when to contact us without the Valari detecting it. It could be a trap," her security chief warned. "Or it could be exactly what we need," Kim countered. "The Valari think they humiliated us, so they're not watching us closely now. Their arrogance gives us an opening." That night, disguised in locally acquired clothing with her features altered by subtle prosthetics, Kim slipped away from the ship to meet with the resistance leaders in an abandoned mining facility deep beneath the capital city. The meeting place was dimly lit and smelled of mineral dust. 3 figures waited, each representing one of the subjugated species. The tallest, a Nari with 4 eyes and skin like polished wood, stepped forward. "You risked much to come here, human," he said, in carefully practiced English. "I am Do, once chief engineer of the Nari fleet before the Valari came." The others introduced themselves: P, a small but fierce-looking Peloth with iridescent scales, and Ku, a stocky Vox whose species had once been renowned mathematicians before the Valari banned them from higher education. "We watched what happened at the palace," Do said. "The Valari did the same to all our first contact delegations. They believe strength only comes in one form." Kim nodded. "They sabotaged my suit. They wanted me to look weak. And yet here you are," P observed, "not looking weak at all." For the next 3 hours, Kim listened to their stories, how the Valari Empire had expanded across 7 star systems in just 30 years, how they targeted worlds with valuable resources but less advanced weapons technology, how they kept conquered peoples divided and fighting among themselves. "They're already planning their move against your colonies," Ku warned, showing Kim intercepted Valari military transmissions. "They've dismissed your species as no threat after seeing you collapse in their court." "They didn't see me," Kim replied with quiet confidence. "They saw what I wanted them to see." She shared Earth's history, how humans had overcome countless challenges, how smaller nations had defeated empires through strategy and determination, how people had risen up against oppression time and again. "We're not physically stronger than the Valari," she admitted. "But strength isn't just about muscle or height or how many arms you have." Ambassador Kim stood frozen at the entrance of the massive crystal palace, her heart racing as she took in the impossible architecture of the Valari royal court. Towering spires stretched upward, defying gravity itself, while the walls glowed, with an eerie blue light that seemed to pulse with life. She adjusted her environmental suit, a bulky, necessary evil in the toxic atmosphere of this alien world. "Remember your training," she whispered to herself. "First impression is everything." As dawn approached, they had formed the beginnings of an alliance. The three resistance leaders provided Kim with detailed information about Valari military, positions and the locations of potential allies on 3 other subjugated worlds. "What can you offer in return?" asked P, always practical. Kim pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. It projected a hologram of Earth ships, not the diplomatic vessels the Valari had seen, but the defense fleet waiting just beyond the system's edge. "Earth has never started a war," Kim said firmly, "but we've finished plenty. The Valari think they know humans from seeing me fall. They have no idea what happens when we stand together." Back aboard her ship the next morning, Kim received an urgent message from Earth Command. The Valari had seized a human research outpost near the system's edge, claiming the territory as their own. No casualties yet, but the scientists were being held as specimens for study. Kim's expression hardened as she read the report. The Valari were moving faster than expected, clearly believing humans would be too intimidated to respond. "Prepare. My new environmental modifications," she ordered her team, and set course back to the palace. Her chief medical officer looked alarmed. "The genetic adaptations aren't fully tested yet. They might only last 48 hours before rejection sets in." Kim's gaze didn't waver. "That's all the time I'll need." As the ship's engines hummed to life, she studied the ancient Valari legal texts the Resistance had provided, specifically the section describing the challenge of worthiness, a tradition the Valari hadn't invoked in over a century. They've seen human weakness," she murmured, memorizing the ritual words she would need. Time they learned about human strength. The Valari royal guards crossed their ceremonial spears at the entrance to the Grand Hall, blocking Kim's path. Unlike her first visit, she wore no environmental suit, standing before them in a simple blue diplomatic uniform with Earth's insignia on the shoulder. "The human returns," one guard sneered, mandibles clicking in amusement. "Where is your breathing?" "Machine, weak one?" Kim smiled, drawing a deep breath of the toxic Valari atmosphere directly into her lungs. The guards stepped back, confusion evident in their 4 eyes. "I request an audience with Grand Monarch Taiho," she said calmly. "Regarding the human outpost, his forces have illegally seized." Word of her arrival, and more importantly, her apparent ability to breathe Valari air, spread through the palace like wildfire. By the time she was escorted into the throne room, nobles had rushed in from every corner of the capital to witness this impossibility. Grand Monarch Taiho sat rigidly on his floating throne, his earlier amusement replaced by wary curiosity. Court fell silent as Kim walked forward, her steps confident and unwavering. "You survive in our air," Taiho observed, leaning forward. "How is this possible?" Kim kept her explanation vague. No need to reveal that Earth scientists had temporarily altered her lung chemistry through genetic modification, a painful procedure she'd volunteered for immediately upon returning to the ship. The burning in her chest with each breath was a small price to pay for the shock value it provided. "Humans adapt," she said simply. "It's what we do best." Whispers rippled through the court. A human that could adapt to breathe poison. Perhaps there was more to these creatures than the Valari had assumed. "You've taken our research outpost," Kim continued, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. 17 human scientists are being held against their will." Taiho waved a dismissive hand. "The territory belongs to the Valari Empire now. Your people were trespassing." "That outpost sits in neutral space, recognized by the Galactic Charter of which you are a signatory," Kim countered, "but I haven't come to debate territorial claims." She took 3 more steps forward, then dropped to one knee, not in submission, but in the formal posture described in the ancient texts she'd studied. "I invoke the Akvaran," she announced in perfect Velari language, using words not spoken in their court for generations. "The challenge of worthiness." The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Nobles turned to each other in disbelief. Grand Monarch Taiho actually rose from his throne, all four arms rigid with shock. "Impossible," hissed his chief advisor. "The human cannot know of the Akvaran. It is sacred law, not shared with outsiders." But Kim continued, reciting the ancient ritual phrases exactly as written in the texts given to her by the resistance. When a species is deemed unworthy by the Velari throne, that judgment may be contested through trial. Should the challenger succeed, their people must be recognized as equals under galactic law. She looked directly at Taiho. Unless, of course, the Grand Monarch fears testing his judgment against a weak human. The court erupted in chaos. Challenging the monarch's judgment was unheard of, but the Akvaran was embedded in their oldest laws. To refuse would undermine the very foundation of Velari authority. Taiho's voice cut through the commotion like a knife. "Silence!" He descended from his throne, towering over Kim. Up close, she could see the fine scales that covered his face, shifting color with his anger. "You dare invoke our sacred traditions," he growled. "You know not what you ask, human." "I know exactly what I ask," Kim replied, maintaining her kneeling position as the ritual required. "3 trials: strength, cunning, and leadership. Should I fail even one, Earth acknowledges Velari superiority and withdraws all claims to disputed territories." "And should you somehow succeed," Taiho asked, mandibles twitching with barely contained rage, "then you recognize humans as equals, return our outpost and our people, and enter into formal diplomatic relations with Earth." The monarch circled her slowly, looking for signs of fear or weakness. Finding none, he turned to address his court. "The human invokes ancient law," he announced. "While it amuses me that such a fragile creature believes it can complete even one trial, I am bound by tradition to accept." He gestured to his son, Prince Jun, who stepped forward eagerly. "My son will oversee the trials, which will begin at first light tomorrow. They will be broadcast throughout the Empire so all may witness the human's inevitable failure." Kim rose to her feet, ignoring the burning in her lungs. "I request that representatives from Earth be allowed to observe." "Granted," Taiho said with a dismissive flick of his hand. "They should witness your humiliation." As Kim was escorted from the throne room, she noticed representatives from the subjugated species watching from the shadows once again. This time, they offered subtle nods of respect. The first part of the plan was working. She had forced the Velari into a position where they had to acknowledge humans on their own terms. Outside the palace, her team waited anxiously by their shuttle. "Did it go?" her chief of staff asked. "They accepted the challenge," Kim replied, finally allowing herself to cough as the pain in her chest intensified. "Alert the ship. We need to prepare for tomorrow." "The medical team is concerned about your lung modifications," her assistant warned. "They're not sure how long they'll last," Kim nodded grimly. "They just need to hold for 3 more days." She looked back at the palace, its crystal spires glowing against the purple sky. "The Velari think this is about proving human. Worth to them, but they've missed the point entirely." "What do you mean?" her assistant asked. "This isn't about proving anything to the Velari," Kim explained, watching as news of the challenge spread through the capital city below. "It's about showing the rest of their empire that the mighty Velari can be challenged, and that's exactly what the resistance needs." Back in her quarters that night, Kim reviewed the details of each coming trial, while medical nanobots worked to ease the strain on her modified lungs. The first would test physical endurance in the methane swamps, an environment lethal to most species. The second would challenge her tactical prowess against Prince Jun himself, a celebrated military commander. The third and most dangerous would test her ability to command respect from a war beast, trained to kill on sight. Anyone would be nearly impossible. All 3 seemed utterly beyond reach. "Good thing impossible is what humans do best," Kim whispered to herself as she prepared for the trials that would either doom her species to subjugation or begin the downfall of an empire. Dawn broke over the methane swamps with an eerie green light filtering through the toxic clouds. Hundreds of Valari nobles hovered on viewing platforms above the murky terrain, their excited chatter carrying across the fetid air. This remote location, on the second moon of the Valari homeworld, was traditionally used for execution rather than trials. Few beings could survive its atmosphere for more than minutes. Kim stood at the edge of the swamp in a simple protective suit, far less bulky than standard equipment. The modifications to her lungs would help her breathe the poisonous air in emergencies, but even those enhancements couldn't handle prolonged exposure to the methane swamp's unique cocktail of gases. Prince June approached, his royal armor gleaming despite the dim light. "The rules are simple, human. Cross the swamp and reach the temple on the far side before the twin suns reach their peak." He gestured to the distant structure, barely visible through the mist, at least 5 miles away. "The path is treacherous. Many natural predators call this place home." "And if I refuse?" Kim asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then you forfeit, and with it, any claim that humans deserve respect from the Valari Empire." He leaned closer. "Though I doubt you'll survive long enough to reach even the halfway point." A horn sounded, signaling the start of the trial. Prince June smiled coldly and returned to his viewing platform, rising quickly above the dangerous terrain. Kim took a deep breath and stepped into the swamp. The ground immediately gave way beneath her feet, sinking her ankle deep in thick, bubbling mud. Each step required immense effort, like walking through wet concrete. "The human begins her journey to failure," announced the royal commentator to the watching crowd. "Note how she struggles already with the basic terrain." Kim ignored the commentary and focused on her training. The Valari expected her to fail, expected her to rely on human strength alone, which would indeed be insufficient here, but that wasn't her plan. After 20 minutes of careful progress, she reached into her pack and removed a small device. The watching nobles leaned forward curiously as she activated it, releasing a high-frequency pulse into the swamp. Almost immediately, the murky surface began to ripple as countless small, eel-like creatures emerged. "The human has disturbed the swamp eels," the commentator exclaimed. "These venomous predators will surely overwhelm her now." But rather than attacking, the eels began consuming the thick mud around Kim's feet, attracted by the frequency of her device, a frequency she'd calculated based on the biological data gathered by her team. As they fed, they created a slightly firmer path before her. "What trickery is this?" demanded Prince June from his platform. Kim didn't respond, conserving her energy as she continued forward, periodically activating the device to clear her path. She wasn't trying to outmuscle the swamp. She was working with it, understanding its ecosystem rather than fighting against it. An hour into the trial, the first real danger appeared, a massive reptilian creature with 6 legs and acidic saliva that could dissolve bone. The crowd roared with excitement as it slithered toward Kim. "Now we'll see how the human handles the swamp drake," the commentator announced gleefully. Instead of running or attempting to fight the beast head-on, Kim reached into her pack again and withdrew a small cylinder. As the creature lunged, she rolled beneath its attack and slapped the cylinder against its underbelly. A sharp hiss followed as the device released a concentrated pheromone extract, collected from the drake's natural prey, that marked Kim as not food. The confused creature circled her 3 times, then slunk away, disappearing into the mist. "Impossible!" shouted one of the nobles. "The human knows the drake's biology." Kim pressed forward, her pace quickening now that she'd established her technique. When the ground became too unstable, she used lightweight mesh panels from her pack to create temporary bridges. When poisonous gas pockets erupted in her path, she used small handheld fans to redirect the flow around her. From above, Prince June watched with growing concern. The human wasn't displaying brute force or even exceptional physical prowess. She was using intelligence, preparation, and an understanding of the environment that no outsider should possess. 3 hours into the trial, with the twin suns climbing higher, Kim encountered the final and most dangerous obstacle, a field of carnivorous plants whose tendrils could detect heat and movement from yards away. The only path to the temple led directly through them. The crowd fell silent, expecting her journey to end here. Even the hardiest Valari warriors avoided these plants, which could strip flesh from bone in seconds. Kim paused at the edge of the field, her suit now torn and stained from the journey. She was visibly exhausted, her breathing labored as the lung modifications began to reach their limits. "The human contemplates her defeat," the commentator announced smugly. "Even if she somehow survived this far, the death blooms will end her challenge." But Kim wasn't contemplating defeat. She was recalling what the resistance leaders had told her about these plants, how they communicated with each other through subtle vibrations in the ground, how they hunted in coordinated patterns, how they could be temporarily disoriented. She removed her boots, feeling the spongy ground directly against her feet. Then she began to move, not in a straight line toward the temple, but in a complex pattern of steps, creating vibrations that mimicked the plant's own communication signals. The watching nobles gasped as the deadly tendrils recoiled in confusion, some even turning on each other, as their coordination systems became scrambled by Kim's movements. "She's dancing with the death blooms," someone shouted in disbelief. It wasn't dancing. It was applied knowledge and precise calculation, each step carefully placed to create maximum disruption with minimum risk. Kim moved through the field like water flowing between stones, never perfectly safe but always just beyond the reach of the snapping tendrils. When she emerged on the other side, the crowd had fallen completely silent. The temple steps were just ahead, and the twin suns had not yet reached their peak. With her last reserves of strength, Kim climbed the ancient stone stairs. At the top, she pressed her palm against the sacred marker as the ritual required, completing the first trial. Prince Jun's viewing platform descended slowly to hover before her. The arrogance was gone from his face, replaced by cold calculation. "You have succeeded in the trial of endurance," he acknowledged reluctantly. "But do not think this means anything. The trial of cunning will demonstrate the true superiority of Velari intellect." Kim merely nodded, too exhausted for words. As the medical team from her ship rushed to treat her, she caught sight of something unexpected. On several of the viewing platforms, members of the subjugated species were present, serving drinks to their Velari masters. Their expressions remained carefully neutral, but their eyes followed her with unmistakable hope. The first crack had appeared in the Velari's confident facade. One trial down, 2 to go. The victory ceremony was set in the palace's grand central court, a space rarely open to outsiders. Sunlight streamed through the massive crystal dome overhead, casting rainbow patterns across the polished stone floor. Thousands of Velari nobles and dignitaries filled the tiered seating, their earlier mockery replaced by grudging curiosity. Kim stood alone in the center of the court, still bearing the marks of her trials. A healing burn traced her left cheekbone, from the military simulation where she had outmaneuvered Prince Jun's forces using unconventional tactics. Her right arm hung in a simple sling, injured during the final trial when she had approached the fearsome warbeast without weapons or armor, offering trust instead of demanding submission. Against all expectations, she had completed all 3 challenges. Grand Monarch Taiho sat rigidly on his ceremonial throne, his forearms tense with barely contained rage. Beside him, Prince Jun watched Kim with a complicated expression, part anger, part respect. "The human has completed the Akvaran," the royal herald announced, voice echoing through the vast chamber. "As demanded by our ancient laws, we gather to acknowledge this unexpected outcome." Kim noticed subtle movements among the servants lining the walls, members of the 3 subjugated species positioning themselves according to the plan they had refined during secret meetings between each trial. The broadcasts of her successes had spread across the empire, igniting hope on worlds that had known only oppression for generations. Taiho rose from his throne, towering over the assembly. His voice carried none of the mockery from their first meeting as he recited the formal words required by tradition. "Human Ambassador Kim has faced our challenges and survived," he acknowledged, though the words seemed to pain him. "As keeper of the sacred ways, I am bound to recognize humans as worthy of proper diplomatic relations." A murmur swept through the crowd. Kim had won, and the Velari would be forced to treat humans as equals, something unthinkable just days before. But Kim saw the subtle signal pass between Taiho and his personal guards. The Grand Monarch had no intention of honoring the agreement. The ceremony was merely for show, and her death was imminent. Before we proceed with the formal recognition, Taiho continued, it is customary for the successful challenger to receive the mark of respect, a personal blessing from the monarch. This was the moment of greatest danger. As tradition demanded, Kim stepped forward and knelt before the throne, head bowed. The perfect position for an assassin's blade. Taiho descended the 3 steps from his throne platform, ceremonial dagger gleaming in his upper right hand. The weapon, ostensibly meant to draw a single drop of blood for the ritual, was positioned to strike a lethal blow. With this mark we welcome, Taiho began but never finished the sentence. The blade descended toward Kim's exposed neck, only to be intercepted by another weapon, one belonging to the captain of Taiho's own royal guard. No, my lord, the captain said firmly, his weapon blocking the monarch's strike. This is not our way. Shocked gasps echoed through the hall. Never in living memory had a royal guard defied the Grand Monarch. You dare, Taiho hissed, mandibles flaring with rage. I swore to uphold the laws of our people, the captain replied. The human won fairly. The Akvaran is sacred. It was the signal the resistance had waited for. Throughout the hall, members of the subjugated species moved into position, not with weapons but with small communication devices hidden in their clothing. As the confrontation at the throne unfolded, they activated these transmitters simultaneously. The palace screens, meant to display Kim's execution to the Empire, suddenly showed something else entirely. Massive uprisings on 3 Valari colony worlds. The resistance had timed their coordinated rebellion to coincide exactly with this moment. What is this treachery? Taiho roared, turning from Kim to the screens in disbelief. Kim rose to her feet, no longer playing the part of the humble victor. This isn't treachery, she said calmly. This is what happens when you build an empire on fear rather than respect. The screens showed Nari engineers disabling Valari weapon systems, Peloth workers seizing control of transport hubs, and Vox, mathematicians overriding security protocols they had secretly embedded in the codes they were forced to write. 3 different species working in perfect coordination, inspired by the human who had proven the mighty Valari could be challenged and defeated. Pandemonium erupted in the hall as nobles rushed toward exits, only to find them sealed. Kim's team had anticipated this reaction and worked with the resistance to lock down the palace during the ceremony. Royal Guard, Taiho bellowed, arrest the human, crush these rebellions. But more and more guards were lowering their weapons, stepping back from a fight they no longer believed in. Kim's victories in the trials had not just impressed the subjugated species, they had awakened doubt among the Valari themselves. Your Majesty, one of his advisors whispered urgently in his ear, we're receiving reports. The uprisings have spread to 7 worlds now, and Earthships have been detected moving into positions near our major military installations. The human fleet had never been far away, positioned strategically throughout the Valari Empire, but remaining just out of detection range until this moment. Kim approached the throne again, this time standing as an equal before the monarch. Grand Monarch Taiho, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Your empire is falling, not because humans conquered it, but because you built it on cruelty and domination. She gestured to the screens showing the spreading rebellion. These people don't want revenge, they want freedom. The choice before you is simple, adapt or collapse completely. Taiho's upper arms clenched into fists, but his lower ones trembled, slightly. For the first time in his reign, uncertainty showed in his eyes. What are your terms? He asked, the words barely audible. Immediate independence for all subjugated worlds, Kim replied without hesitation. An end to forced labor and resource theft, and a new galactic federation where all species have equal representation, including the Valari. Prince June stepped forward, surprising everyone. Father, our military installations are surrounded. Our security systems have been compromised. The human offers us a path to survival. A tense silence fell over the hall as Taiho considered his options. Kim knew his pride warred with his instinct for self-preservation. Around them more feeds appeared on the palace screens, showing Earth ships in defensive formations, not attacking but clearly ready to respond if needed. Finally, Taiho's shoulders slumped ever so slightly. "I will consider these terms," he said, which was as close to acceptance as his pride would allow. 6 months later, Kim stood on the observation deck of an Earth diplomatic vessel, watching as representatives from 27 worlds, including the Valari, signed the charter establishing the new Galactic Federation. Former Grand Monarch Taiho, now simply the Valari representative, sat among equals rather than above them. "You know he still hates you," Dr. Lee commented, joining Kim. At the window, Kim smiled slightly. "He hates what I represent, the proof that true strength isn't about domination." Below them on the newly liberated Nari homeworld, reconstruction projects were well underway. Earth engineers worked alongside Nari, Piloth, and Vox specialists, rebuilding what the Valari Empire had destroyed. "Do you think he understands now?" Lee asked, nodding toward Taiho. Kim watched as the former monarch observed a human medical team training Valari doctors in techniques developed on Earth, knowledge freely shared rather than hoarded. "I think he's beginning to," she replied, "understanding that strength can mean knowing when not to use force, that leadership can mean lifting others up rather than standing on their backs." She touched the small scar on her cheek, a permanent reminder of the trials. The Valari thought they were testing human strength. They never realized they were testing their own. As the signing ceremony concluded, cheers erupted across the planet. Not for conquest or domination, but for the beginning of something new, a galaxy where different kinds of strength could work together rather than against each other. The human who had been laughed at by alien royalty had not sought revenge. Instead, she had offered a better way forward, proving that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in making others kneel, but in helping them stand.